is that trauma, which is the case with your patient, is like a magnifying, it's like a megaphone, right? So like our trauma puts whatever happens to us through a megaphone and it expands it, right? Welcome to Tell Your Story, the podcast. We are your co-hosts, Gene McIntyre, pastor and emotional intelligence coach, and Marybeth Steigenga, counselor and relationship coach. We believe that everyone has an extraordinary story to share. Together, we invite you to embark on a journey of self-discovery as we unravel the profound wisdom that lies in looking back to propel us forward. Prepare to be moved and inspired by tales of unwavering resilience, personal growth, and the pursuit of authentic living, including your own. Join us as we delve into the transformative power of storytelling. Because when you tell your story, you have the potential to change your life. And make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast so you can be inspired. Good morning, and welcome to Tell Your Story, the podcast. I am pastor and life coach and therapist Gene McIntyre, and this is my friend Marybeth Steigenga, who is a licensed pastoral counselor and relationship expert. Marybeth, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm doing great. It's early here in Tucson. It was dark when I got up, but we're doing great and excited to do episode number 9, Jenny. We're rolling right along. I know. We need like some fireworks here.
You do.
So yeah, excited to get going. And today I'm going to take our framework, which we have been explaining all the way up in the previous 8 episodes. And I'm going to apply it to one of my clients who I'm changing her name to protect her identity. But I do want to just walk you through the framework as it goes with her story. And then next week, Jenny, what are you going to do?
I'm going to be using the same framework, and I'm going to be talking about Marisa, which of course is another fictional name for one of my patients. So we always protect the identity of our patients. And well, you all are in for a treat because Marybeth is very organized, bullet pointed, linear kind of a thinker. As you guys remember, I'm more of a curvy, back and forth kind of a person. So the beautiful thing about Marybeth and I having such distinct personalities is that you know that you can tell your story in your own style, that there's not a right or wrong way to do it, but get as much understanding as you can from Marybeth. It's going to be a lot easier to follow than next week's, right, Marybeth?
Yeah, mine might be easier to follow. Yours might be more enjoyable to listen to. So it's but you got to kind of roll with it. So again, I have my notes off to the side because I am a very linear person. I don't want to miss any points. So I'm going to kind of be looking over here. I'm not trying to ignore people. And Jenny, you can, of course, you can be like in sports, they have the color commentator who like adds flair to the thing. That's what your job is today.
Yeah, and we won't hold the lack of eye contact against you, okay?
Okay. All right. All right, good. Okay, so my client, again, we're gonna call her Susan. And the title of my episode when I told my story was Embracing the Mess, and I'm calling Susan's chaotic childhood because she had a very interesting upbringing. So when she came to me, she was actually struggling with her marriage. She was in her marriage having some issues and having a ton of anxiety, and she didn't know where this anxiety was coming from. And she's like, I can't function and I don't know what to do. And so I always start my sessions with, and I don't know, Jenny, if I've ever talked to you about this, but have you ever done the adverse childhood experiences scale?
I have never done it.
Oh, I'm gonna have to send it to you. So it's an ACE, we call it the ACE assessment, and it asks 10 questions about your childhood before age of 18, and then you get a score at the end. And like I scored 0 on the ACE. because I have, like, very none childhood trauma from when 18. It doesn't score loss as a trauma. It's really like abuse and neglect. And so I scored 0. Most people will score 2, 3, 4. Susan scored a 10. So when I saw that, I was like, whoa, she's got some stuff going on here, right? Which is the source of her anxiety and relationship issues. So I'm like, we're going to have to go back. We're going to have to circle back in order to move forward with her.
I'll be
And
very interested in taking a look at the ACE, because I use CAN, which is like child and adolescence. I can't remember what the N stands for, but it's basically like challenges and strengths. It's called CANs, and that's what I've been using. But I would love to take a look at ACE.
yeah, if you for listeners out there, if you want to do it, you can just go, I think if you do ACE assessment online, if you Google that, it'll come up. There's some online ones that you can just do online. It'll score it for you. You can print one out and do it. I do like to caution people though, like sometimes it's better to do it if you know that you come from a lot of trauma, it's probably better to have a therapist or a counselor or a coach like walk through that with you, because it can maybe trigger you if you go like, oh my gosh, like look at all this going on.
Sure, for sure.
So yeah, so just do it with caution, but you can give yourself a score. Okay, so Susan, I'm going to start on the timeline, and I just picked 2 of her stories that were positive for her and 2 stories that had a negative or were a hard impact. So her positive stories, she grew up like alcoholic dad, domestic violence, police coming to the house all the time, not enough food, never clean clothes, like just a really traumatic, chaotic home that she grew up in. But when she went to school, she met her best friend, and that best friend's mom kind of took her under her wing. And she, to this day, calls that woman mom. And so this woman provided her with a safe environment. She spent a lot of time in their home. So she saw like, oh, this is what a clean house looks like. This is what a healthy family functions like. This is how someone who loves you treats you. And this is a healthy marriage. And so she was able to see that. And that woman also introduced her to Jesus. So she became a Christian through this woman, and still to this day calls her mom.
Sorry,
So
I just dropped a bunch of paper, but
well, it is
nothing to see here.
nothing to see. Just ignore that. Just ignore that. So 2 positive stories. She had a good friend with a caring mom, and she got introduced to her faith and carried that through high school. It did end up like, I think after she got out of the house, I think she left the house at 16 to live with this other family. And then Child Protective Services came in and removed her brothers and sisters got removed, and it was a traumatic experience. So, okay, so negative stories, I already talked about it: alcoholic parents, domestic violence, neglect and poverty, no food, no clean clothes, never feeling safe. You didn't know when the police were going to come. You didn't know if your dad was going to get drunk and beat you, or beat up one of your siblings, or beat up your mom. Your mom was very critical, probably had some narcissistic stuff going on there too, but very just like demeaning and critical, and she never got a positive like anything from her parents. Actually, she got pretty much nothing from her parents. So when you think of what a parent is supposed to do, provide love, safety, meet your needs, both physical and emotional, no one was able to check any of those boxes off for her. So luckily, she did have this other friend whose mom took her under her wing. Her siblings have a completely different story. So Susan went on to graduate from college, become a medical assistant in an eye surgery clinic, She's married, she has a daughter, very successful. Now she was struggling with some of that stuff, but very successful. Until the trauma caught up with her, right? You can only stuff it so long. It starts to come out in your relationships and sometimes at work, and that kind of stuff. So that's when she came and sought out help.
But what I would like to comment about is the fact that her life took a turn for the better, albeit only temporarily, right? But it took a turn for the better because she found a friend, because she found a parental figure, because she found faith. So those things cannot be, under overstated, as to the positive impact they had in her life, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So if we move on to the next step in the timeline, we talk about rotten eggs or themes. So the rotten eggs are the ones that can be more negative, right? You can also have positive themes in your life. So one of
eggs.
you can have you can have fresh eggs or rotten eggs, I
Oh,
guess.
I like it. Fresh
Right?
eggs. I like
Yeah,
it.
fresh eggs or rotten eggs. So she was very resilient, right? Like she came through a hard thing. So she learned how to be resilient. She learned self-reliance, like, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, but self-reliance. I got to do this because nobody else is going to do it for me. She had faith is a big theme in her life. It's because she feels like that rescued her and took her, where she needed to go. So that's a good one. One of the negatives ones is distrust and fear of abandonment, because of how she grew up. And also like a desire for stability and love. Like she never had stability. It was just an unstable home with chaos. I think that's just her story, is just it always was chaotic. And into adulthood, I'll tell an interesting story about her. She tells this story about today in her pantry, in her kitchen. Everything is lined up like super straight. It's color coded. It's just, and she will absolutely go over the edge if anybody like puts something wrong in the pantry in a different way than she wants it. It is her place where she has control, right? So no control in her childhood is coming out in this one area. There's other areas, but her pantry is her area where she like has to have control.
I love that. No predictability versus complete predictability, right? Complete chaos versus complete order. Very interesting.
Yeah. So when you look at that, and she brought me a picture, and I was like, wow. I was like, girl, I would like you to come and do my pantry. It was all these beautiful like baskets and containers, and they were all labeled with like chalk writing, and it was fabulous. But she absolutely cannot. I was like, so if I came over to your house and I like moved a can of soup, she goes, that would be it. I wouldn't. I couldn't.
Wow,
So
interesting.
a control thing for her, right? Okay, so next we talk about the broken records, right? And we laughed a few episodes ago about how probably people younger in our audience don't even understand this concept of broken record. But Google it, you'll understand what we're talking about. I'm sure there's a YouTube.
Yes, I found it. When I talk to my patients about broken records, I literally find a clip on YouTube that says broken record, and it shows that.
Okay, so yeah, go look that up.
It's there.
Because it actually is a very good analogy of what happens in your brain. So some of her core beliefs or broken records were, I can't trust anyone. It's not okay to feel or show my emotions. She very much didn't understand emotions, what they were, how they functioned. I'm not in control. Like everywhere she wants to seek control because she didn't feel in control. I'm weak. I can't get what I want. And I can't trust. She has a very difficult time, which was coming out in her marriage, right? Like her husband really wasn't doing anything that would, in a normal, healthy person, wouldn't probably trigger, but she was super triggered by it. She's like, I can't trust him. I can't trust him. He's not going to do this. He doesn't follow through. And it was just so evident, but it really had nothing to do with her husband and everything to do with how she was raised with her family.
And something that I learned, Mary Beth, when I was dealing with my own problems in my marriage is that trauma, which is the case with your patient, is like a magnifying, it's like a megaphone, right? So like our trauma puts whatever happens to us through a megaphone and it expands it, right? So maybe the husband was semi-unreliable. Maybe there were instances where he may have done things that might have somewhat shaken her trust. But putting those incidents to that magnifying, that megaphone of trauma probably made those things feel a lot worse than they needed to be. And that's the power of those broken records.
Yep. And an issue with her too is she was very didn't know what a boundary was, didn't know how to set a boundary in her relationship. So if her husband would do something, she didn't know how to say to him in a healthy way, like, hey, that hurts my feelings, or hey, can we talk about this? She would just shut down because, again, not okay to feel my emotions. So then, right, so she walked away and it became troublesome.
Because the majority of people that lack boundaries, and I should know because I was one of those, we refuse to feel our emotions, but the emotions are still there. And because you don't know how to set boundaries, people keep violating your boundaries and you continue to accumulate emotions. Well, you're not processing them. You're not talking about it. So it becomes resentment and it starts really messing up with your relationships. And sometimes the people you are having problems, some of them may have a clue, but some of them may not have a clue because you're unable to talk about it. And you're collecting resentment. And one day they ask if you have some salt and you go, what? And they're like, I just asked you for salt. But you've been accumulating all these repressed emotions, then, like that.
So those are all her core beliefs and her broken records. And that kind of shaped her and influenced how she, approached relationships in her life. And one day she walked into my office, and like I said, very professional, very put together, beautiful makeup, eyelashes, Jenny, like you, beautiful. Like she was a lovely, lovely woman, inside and out for me, but was struggling. So her first step in the 7 steps to heal was decision time, right? She got to the point of, I don't want to live like this anymore. I can't, because of this crippling anxiety, live like this. My marriage is suffering because of this. So she made a decision and she sought help. So that was her first thing. I need to make a plan. I need to do that. The next one was we worked together to establish boundaries, right? What is a boundary? How do I establish a boundary? And that was a tricky thing for her to do. As you know, it's hard, right? It's hard to like learn how to set boundaries and do that, but she worked really hard at it. Another thing we did for her that she chose to do is to create a healthy support team. She had, still to this day, really good friends with her friend that she grew up with and her mom, but that was really her limited support. Like that's who she had. And so she went out, and for her, the way she did it is she joined a women's Bible study at a church.
Great start.
Right? So that was a good place to start and develop some good, healthy relationships in a safe place where she could talk about stuff. And it was a good group, and she's still participating in that today. Step number 4 is choose the way you speak and listen. And she really had to do that in her marriage, especially in her it didn't spill over her professional life. She was able to like control it there, but at home, not so much. So her and her husband would get into these knockdown, drag out fights because she was the megaphone, right? And she would respond in a angry, critical, screaming kind of way to him. And then most people will say, once you're escalated, I think we can all relate to this in our life. You can't hear what the other person is saying because you are so escalated and I'm right, you hurt me, I'm right. You cannot hear that other person.
Absolutely.
And so, right, it's the filters we talked about.
Yeah.
You hear it in a way that's not there, or you're not hearing it at all. So she had to work on pausing and letting herself de-escalate, maybe doing some mindfulness stuff. I taught her, like, you don't have to address that issue in the moment with your husband. You can say, hey, I need to step away. I'm going to go read a book, take a drive, take a shower. And then we're going to come back in an hour or 2 hours and discuss this. And then you come in a de-escalated fashion, a little bit easier to have a healthy conversation. So we worked on those skills. And then the 2 steps that she did multiple steps, we said, but we started with 2 to change her core beliefs, was to do affirmations, like to speak the truth, you know. So if I go back to her core beliefs, is I can't trust anyone, is there are some untrustworthy people, but for the majority of people, I can trust them. And just to kind of say those things over, right, till your brain clicks in. It's not okay to feel my emotions. She would say, no, my emotions are valid and it's okay that I feel them, and not judge, right? I'm feeling super overwhelmed or super angry or super whatever, and that's okay. I always use if a friend came to me and gave me their story and they were super and they said, oh, I'm so overwhelmed and angry about this, I wouldn't say to them, well, that's wrong, you shouldn't feel that way. But when I do it, that's what I say to myself, right? So try to reverse that and go, what would I say to a friend in this situation? I wouldn't tell them that they're wrong, but why do I do that to myself?
Marybeth, I love the fact that she was talking to herself, because when we spoke about the amygdala hijack, we spoke about how actually our words, the way we think, and even the way we act can like completely rewire the way we think and the way we get hijacked by our amygdala. Like there's power in those affirmations. And you know, there's a lot of people like who think it's like something like mysterious. But in reality, no, like we can literally impact our brain pathways by the things we say and by the things we practice. So by her continually repeating to herself those affirmations, she literally can change the way she thinks.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was one step. And you know how, I don't know if you remember this, but as we were growing up, everybody was like, well, by the time you're 10, your brain is the way it is and you can't change it, and you're stuck that way for life. And that's just so not true. The research now just proves that you can change those neural pathways. Exactly. Your brain can heal and change and do what it needs to do. So
this is why therapy is so important, right? Because like the part that is right about that statement is that a lot of the core messages we receive can be fixated, but that's no different than, we know that if a child learns a different language very young, it's going to be like versus you and me trying to learn a new language right now, right? So it has to do with retention, the way our mind works. When we're kids, we retain those things better. But you're absolutely right. The premise that those things cannot be changed, that's where we go wrong. Now, it's going to take effort. It's probably going to take therapy. It's going to probably take reading books and whatever. But are we able to change it, to reinvent ourselves, to transform ourselves? You better believe we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that she implemented was, I like to call it the power of the pause, is there's a quote by Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called The Search for Meaning. He's a concentration camp survivor. And his quote goes something like this. I might not get it perfectly right, but he said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies our ability to choose. And in that choice is our freedom and growth. So if you think about it, between someone saying something and my response, there is a space. And that is the space where you need to pause. And if you need to walk away, you can walk away and say, I need to go. I'll be back in 10 minutes. If you can't walk away, you can say, you can do some deep breathing. You can do some progressive muscle relaxation, do some mindfulness. I think the power of the pause is very powerful, for lack of a better way.
I love that, Marybeth. I love that.
So she really implemented, my husband says something, I'm going to choose to pause before I respond. And that really helped her kind of break that cycle of those thoughts. And in that moment too, pause, depending on how long your pause is, and really think about, what am I feeling? Is that true? Can I dispute that? Kind of work your way through that.
I've read somewhere that President Lincoln, when he would get really mad, he used to write this horrible notes towards the person that had, but he would never send the letters. He would keep them in his desk. And then like a few hours later, he would read them. And most of those letters he never sent out.
Oh, yeah.
That was his pause.
There you go.
That would make him pause. And then later he would revisit it and he was like, it wasn't that big of a deal. A lot to learn there, but I love the thought process of the pause. I love it.
Yeah, so the pause is important. And then for step number 6, which is fail better or suck less tomorrow, she really adopted, I'm going to call it a growth mindset, to use kind of a therapy-ish term, but just understanding that setbacks were going to be natural and that it was okay and that she could fail and learn from that and do better the next time that it happened. And so a lot of us, and her included, you fail and you're like, oh, it's done. I suck at this. I'm done. I can't do it. It's not going to work. But she would get back up and go at it again.
I think, Marybeth, that's probably one of the most important steps of the 7 steps, because we are all going to get it wrong when we're trying to get better at something. And if we give up every time we fail, then we're sabotaging our growth and our healing.
For sure, for sure. And then last was for that one is clean up your mess. And so she took responsibility. She owned what she was bringing into this relationship, into her life, and took responsibility for it and worked on changing that, realizing that ultimately she can't change her husband, right? She can only change how she responds to him in that situation. So she needs to own her part in it. And she did that.
How did she own it, Marybeth?
She would say things like this to her husband. Hey, I'm paraphrasing. I acted kind of crazy, or I was kind of a brat in that situation. And I'm going to apologize for that. I could have responded better. This is what happened inside of me, and this is why I responded that way. I'm so sorry I did that. Here's why I did it. Can we do it differently next time so that, and I'm going to work on that. I'm going to continue to work on that. So she would just own her part in it, not excusing his part in it, but saying like, this is what I brought to it, and I'm apologizing for that. Maybe next time we could do it this way. And that was her way of owning, instead of being like, well, if he wouldn't have done that, then I wouldn't have responded that way. So he needs to change because then I'll be fine. But she realized like, no, I'm bringing some stuff into this. I love the megaphone example. I'm bringing the megaphone, right? I'm giving him the megaphone and it's coming out the other end. So she needed to learn to own her stuff. Own your stuff, right? We all have stuff and you got to own it. I do that all the time in my marriage now. Not so good at it 20 years ago, but now I'll be like, wow, I was kind of a brat. Like, I am sorry. That was super sarcastic, you know? I do that now and it just deflates it
The
deflates
tension, right?
right? It does. It takes it away and it takes away my anger. And then he can be de-escalated too, because now I'm not attacking anymore. So anyway, now we move into how she moved forward with the 7 steps. So the first one in the step is to know thyself. And I mean, you can tell by all the work she did in those that she dove into self-discovery, right? We did all kinds of fun assessments with her. We did the Enneagram assessment, and we did a values assessment, and we did a core beliefs assessment, and we did a character strengths assessment, just so that she could really figure out, like, who am I? I think when you come out of a trauma background, that identity is kind of like skewed a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
And so you got to figure out, who am I? And she went on a journey. And Jenny, I don't know if you know this about me, but I love assessments.
Oh, why would I know that?
Yeah, I just love assessments.
I know you do.
So know thyself, and then let go of the past and grieve for what was not. She had to allow herself to grieve her childhood, right? She did not have a mom she deserved, or a dad she deserved, or a safe home that she deserved. She just didn't have it. Can't go back and fix it. It is what it is. And it's okay to be sad and angry and all of those steps of grief, right? That you go through. And it's okay to do that.
Absolutely.
So she
Absolutely.
spent some time in the grief. Being grateful. We talk about grief and gratitude. I love those two together. She really worked on cultivating an attitude that was grateful for what she did have, right? She did have a successful career and she was married. She did love her husband. She had a beautiful daughter. And so she was grateful for what she did have. And she learned to look back and go, oh, because of how I was raised, because of that, I am resilient. I am self-reliant, which can be really great skills if you use them in a healthy way. And so she was able to go back, like, I probably wouldn't be where I am today had I not had those experiences.
That's hard to admit, but the reality is that even traumatic and negative experiences shape us.
They do. And you can use them for, I always tell you can use them for evil or you can use them for good. So it's right, it's how you do that.
You can use them as an excuse for the way you are, or you can use them as a kind of like the platform from which to catapult you into a better way of being, right?
Your way of being, yep. Next step, be kind to yourself, do self-care. Funny is she loves, like you, Jenny, makeup and skincare. That became her thing, you know. That became that. She didn't really call that self-care, but I did point that out. Like, if you're spending 10 or 15 minutes a night in your bathroom by yourself with music on and you're doing, that's self-care.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love
And so she practiced some good self-care. And then number 5 is be curious about your thoughts and actions. I love this one. Because to me, it's like when something happens and a thought pops in or a core belief pops in, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why am I thinking this? Like, that's just crazy. And so it's good to be curious. Where did this come from? Why am I doing this? What does this mean? Just like think about that instead of going or getting angry about it. Oh, here comes that dumb thought again. I thought I dealt with that. It's like, no, really get curious. How come that's popping up now? Because it helps to heal. And then staying positive is step number 6, or persevering, or grit, right? And I'm making this whole thing sound super easy, I think. Not easy, not fast. This was not 2 sessions of counseling, right? This was months and months and months of work that she had to do. So perseverance was hard. It's hard. I don't know how I think I say it in every episode. It's hard. It's very hard. And you need that support team. You need maybe a coach or a counselor. It's hard work. And then set yourself free, which is the power of forgiveness. And she had a lot, she had to go back. And I remember saying this to her early on. We need to think about forgiving your parents. And she's like, absolutely not. I won't do it. I'm not going to do it. They don't deserve my forgiveness. What they did to me was unforgivable. I will not do it. I will never forgive them. Right. And we kind of tabled that discussion. But as we worked to get healthy, and she realized, like, I'm holding on to all this anger and bitterness, not really affecting my parents.
Exactly.
She wasn't even in contact with them. So they don't even know that I am angry and bitter.
You're not punishing them, you're punishing yourself.
Right. And so at that point, and we talked about that, forgiveness does not mean excusing their behavior. It does not mean reconciling with them and letting them continue to hurt you. That is not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is letting go of that rage and hurt and all of that stuff that comes from, justifiably so, those feelings for what you went through. Not trying to diminish that, but you do need to get to a place of forgiveness.
Exactly.
And forgiveness is a journey. It's not, for me, at least for me, it's not a line you cross. Like, I don't go like, I forgive you, which I do, and then all of a sudden I feel great. Like, you gotta kind of work on letting that stuff go. So it's a little bit of a path and a road that you continue to do, but it's not just I forgive you and then it's like, oh, I feel so much better. That's not how it works either.
And I think forgiveness, like love, is a decision, right? Like, a lot of people think it's an emotion, so they're like waiting for this feeling of forgiveness to invade them. No, like, you need to make a decision. Like, I'm not going to be twice this person's victim, right? The first time they victimize me. The second time, I give them the opportunity to victimize me, because if I hold on to resentment, it's going to hurt me. So
Yeah.
like, I think forgiveness, and you helped me with that a lot when I started seeing you, is to make a decision. And then your emotions better catch up, right? They
Right.
won't catch up immediately, but they will catch up eventually. But
Yeah.
it starts with a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a little faith thing in here because, as listeners know, faith is an important part of both of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, for me too, is obedience. When God calls me to do something that's hard, I don't have peace about that before I obey. Peace follows obedience. So you
Yes.
do the hard things, your emotions catch up. Same thing with forgiveness. You make that choice, it's so hard. Your emotions will catch up.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. And forgiveness is also a phrase that we use a lot, I think perfectly applies to obedience, and that is fake it till you make it.
Yes. Yes.
I've called people that I needed to forgive, and that's going to vary from situation to situation. Sometimes you're going to be able to contact the person, sometimes you're not going to be able to contact the person, right? It all depends. But there's been a few people that I've approached and I've said, you know what, I'm really sorry that happened. I want us to be okay, and when I made the phone call, when I made the approach, I was feeling like punching that person. So I had to do a little bit of faking it. But you know what? I did it because I knew holding on to resentment was not going to be good for me. And sometimes taking a decision is not going to come, like you say, it's going to be hard. But sometimes you have to take that first step towards your decision, embracing your decision of forgiveness.
Yep, it's the healing is a choice. We'll keep, that's our theme, right? Healing is a choice. You
For
can make
sure.
a choice or you can choose not to. You do have a choice.
Yep, yep.
So yeah, so that wraps up Susan's story, and I'm really happy to tell everyone that she's doing great. Her marriage is thriving and she is implementing these things, and she doesn't see me anymore. She has graduated and is doing great. And every once in a while she'll shoot me a text message and tell me something, you know, about, I remember when you told me this and I just implemented that. And so really she's doing amazing. But it's because it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with her being willing to just do the hard work and just stick with it. And it's hard work, but well worth it in the end.
Yeah. And before we go, I wanted to address something you've said several times. Like you've said, okay, step this, step that. And you've said several times, you know, it's hard, it's hard, it's hard. But what I want to encourage our audience is like, one of the beautiful things of creating this framework and us following this framework to talk about our patients, and then use that framework to talk about your own stories that you're going to share with us. And if you haven't emailed us yet that you want to be featured and tell your story, please do. There's our email address right now on the screen. Please tell us that you want your story to be featured. And the idea is that every time we tell a story, we're going to use the same framework. So it is hard, but because there's a framework and we're going to follow it over and over and over again, the idea is by listening to each other's stories, using the same framework, we are going to get a command of the power of our story and our ability to heal and establish and follow all these steps towards healing.
And I would encourage our listeners to take the framework and try it.
Yep.
Try it, right? You're going to get some, even if you can't complete all the 7 steps and the 7 steps, like really like take one hard childhood story and say, I always say there's 0 to 10 of what's hard, right? Don't pick a 10, pick a 4 or a 5, something that was challenging, and say like, what did that do? How did that change me? It's amazing the healing that will get you.
Exactly. The framework is in the description of this video for those of you that are listening, that are watching via YouTube. And if you are listening to the podcast, just go to our YouTube channel, Tell the Story Podcast, Gene McIntyre, Marybeth Steigenga. Go to the description, grab the framework, and like Marybeth says, start practicing and using it. And in the process, if when you use it, you're like, yeah, I'm changing my life and I want to share with others, then join us and be one of the stories that we feature.
Yeah, because we love story. So
Yes,
Jenny was the inspiration with her book, which, when is your book coming out, by the way? Is it almost done?
Anytime now, anytime.
Okay.
It's on print. So I'm excited. I'll let you guys know as soon as it's out.
All right. It's I read it. I'm telling everybody that you should read it. It's all about story, and that's how this whole thing happened, because I was like, this is powerful stuff. So we'll look forward to that.
For sure, for sure. Well, to our wonderful listeners and viewers, it was wonderful to see you again on episode 9 of season 1 of Tell Your Story podcast. Marybeth, great job telling us about the story of Susan. And next week, I'll come back with Marisa's story.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing your way of identifying and working through the framework. It should be more colorful and fun than mine. So everybody come back next week and listen.
She's lying, but thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you guys next in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, couple of weeks.
All right, take care now. Bye-bye.